Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're exploring a really innovative concept. It's about how a traditional military training tool, the staff ride, is being, well, reimagined.
Right. It's being transformed into something focused squarely on nurturing the ethical side of the warrior ethos.
We're diving deep into how courage is really forged through conscience, how character is built.
And what's really fascinating here, I think, is that this isn't your standard professional military education, PME. No. This specific approach, which comes from groups like the Langley Catholic Men and the Catholic Military Apostolate, it deliberately mixes that hard-nosed military analysis with deep spiritual and ethical reflection.
So, kind of a shortcut to understanding how people make those tough ethical calls under immense pressure.
Exactly. It's about preparing the inner person, not just the tactical mind.
And the specific curriculum we're digging into today is called the Dutch Courage series. It's led by Colonel Johan Wagner. He's a foreign liaison officer from the Netherlands.
Yeah, and it unpacks three really critical moments in Dutch history. We're talking 1667, 1940, and 1995.
Moments where Dutch service members face just impossible odds.
Right. And the goal isn't just history. It's about drawing out timeless lessons for ethical choices and, importantly, spiritual resilience that apply right now.
Okay, so let's get into the engine behind this. How does this whole approach work?
Well, before we jump into the specific battles, it helps to understand the method itself. The staff right concept, it's actually pretty old.
Goes way back, right?
Yeah, you can trace it back to Frederick the Great of Prussia, literally walking his officers over battlefields. Then Clausewitz, in On War, he really advocated for that kind of rigorous analysis to sharpen strategy.
And then Helmuth von Moltke the Elder, he's the one who formalized the three-phase method still used. Preliminary study, field study, integration.
It's the one, the classic structure.
But, that sounds very tactical. Troop movements, logistics, terrain. How does this modern version move beyond that checklist?
See, that's the key innovation we're talking about. This adaptation takes that solid, reliable structure and injects a really comprehensive ethical warfare analysis.
Also.
Primarily through the lens of just war doctrine. And it aligns that directly with core values, like the U.S. core values. So the study stops being just a tactical after-action report.
And it becomes
a tool for moral and spiritual formation, for building character.
Okay, so the main question shifts. It's less, did we win, and more, did we act rightly while fighting?
Precisely. Instead of just focusing on successful maneuvers, this method zeroes in on the moral dimensions of command decisions.
Makes sense.
It pushes participants towards critical thinking about principles like necessity, proportionality, distinction between combatants and non-combatants, and basic humanity. It forces leaders to really internalize the moral weight of their actions.
So they're better prepared for those messy, real-world ethical dilemmas, the kind where those lines are incredibly blurred.
Exactly. It's about training judgment, moral judgment before the crisis hits.
That really clarifies the difference. And it raises a question, I think, for you listening. How can studying these past battles through this specific ethical lens actually help modern leaders navigate today's complexities while holding on to that moral responsibility?
It's a crucial question.
Yeah.
And this whole emphasis on immersion, on judgment, it's likely to grow. The sources we looked at suggest things like virtual reality, augmented reality.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they could soon allow people to virtually step into those historical dilemmas, make them feel more immediate, more visceral. Imagine grappling with those choices firsthand.
That would definitely deepen the impact. Okay, let's pivot now. Let's see this theory in action with the Dutch Courage series itself. We're tracing a story across centuries, right?
That's right. It's a progression from, bold initiative to really stubborn defense, and then finally to a very painful reckoning.
3 case studies showing how a smaller nation consistently drew on courage tied to conscience.
Demonstrating that integrity, that moral core, can shape action even when everything seems stacked against you.
So let's start with the first one, the really audacious one. 1667, the raid on the Medway.
Okay, so context. Second Anglo-Dutch War. England is, frankly, broke. They just had the plague, the Great Fire of London.
Right, the treasury was empty.
Exactly. And the Dutch Admiral Michel de Ruyter, he sees an opportunity. He needs a decisive blow to force England into the Treaty of Breda on terms favorable to the Dutch.
And he planned something incredible.
Oh, it was a masterpiece of planning and intelligence, not just a battle. The Dutch used incredibly precise tide charts, intimate knowledge of the local waters, even the moon phase,
Wow.
to time it perfectly. They sailed right up the Thames, then the Medway, deep into English territory. They caught the English fleet completely by surprise, anchored at Chatham.
And they didn't just sink ships.
No, they destroyed some, but they captured the English flagship, the HMS Royal Charles, towed it home as a trophy. It's still a national relic in the Netherlands today. They basically stole England's pride.
That's just stunning audacity. And the ethical insight drawn here.
The sources frame it as an act of faith in duty before outcome. It wasn't guaranteed to work. The lesson is that disciplined preparation, that meticulous planning, that itself is a form of courage, a quiet courage that comes before the action.
Okay, fast forward nearly 3 centuries, May 1940, the Battle for the Hague. Very different situation.
Totally different. Germany launches Fall Gelb, the Blitzkrieg, into the Low Countries. Their plan for the Netherlands? Immediate decapitation.
A massive airborne assault, right? The biggest up to that point.
Yeah, something like 4,000 paratroopers aiming to seize the Dutch government in The Hague instantly. They targeted 3 key airfields: Ypenburg, Ockenburg, and Valkenburg.
Expecting a quick collapse. Psychological shock and awe.
That was the plan. But the Dutch response was surprisingly fast and, well, fierce, even though they were totally outmatched on paper.
They fought back hard.
They did. Dutch soldiers, even pilots getting airborne under fire, they counterattacked immediately. By nightfall, amazingly, they had retaken all 3 airfields.
That's incredible and significant.
Hugely significant. It was the first major defeat for German airborne forces in the war. Strategically, it bought crucial time.
Allowing the Queen and government to escape.
Exactly. Queen Wilhelmina and her ministers got away to Britain, preserving the legitimate government. The ethical takeaway here is powerful. Courage fueled by hope.
That the will to fight, driven by a just cause, can actually overcome seemingly impossible material odds.
It proved that resolve matters deeply.
Okay, now the final case study,
Yeah.
and this one it's much darker. Srebrenica, 1995.
Yes. This one is incredibly difficult, but maybe the most vital for ethical reflection today. You have Dutch Bat the Third deployed under a UN mandate.
A safe area mission.
Supposedly. But they had a deeply divided mandate, very limited resources, and were tasked with protecting around 40,000 refugees crammed into this area.
And the command structure was problematic.
Massively. There was confusion and friction between the UN command on the ground and NATO air power. Requests for airstrikes, crucial ones, got stalled in bureaucracy.
So the Dutch troops were left exposed, lightly armed.
Tragically exposed. They were simply overwhelmed when General Ratko Mladić's Bosnian Serb forces moved in. They couldn't resist effectively.
Leading to the massacre.
Yes. The horrific massacre of about 8,000 Bosnian Muslim men and boys. The lasting impact highlighted in the analysis is the profound moral injury those Dutch soldiers carried home.
Moral injury. That's a heavy term.
It is. It speaks to the psychological and spiritual wounds that happen when you're forced to participate in or witness events that violate your core moral beliefs, especially due to orders or, in this case, systemic failures.
So the lesson from Srebrenica.
It underscores the absolute necessity of clear command, adequate resources, realistic mandates, and what the sources call responsibility beyond orders.
Responsibility beyond orders. That sounds like a huge weight, especially for junior personnel facing impossible situations with tied hands. Does this curriculum offer ways to deal with moral failure, or is it just about defining success?
That's a really important point. It's less about finding some perfect path, and more about training the judgment to recognize ethical pitfalls, systemic flaws, and moral hazards before they lead to disaster.
So studying Srebrenica isn't about assigning blame decades later, but understanding the conditions that lead to tragedy.
Exactly. And understanding that moral injury is a real wound of war, often stemming from command or political failures. It teaches the critical importance of speaking truth to power, documenting concerns, demanding clarity, especially when civilian lives are at risk.
And there were real-world consequences beyond the individual soldiers.
Absolutely. The entire Dutch government resigned over this in 2002. It took that long. And Prime Minister Rutte formally apologized to the Dutch Bat veterans only in 2022. The national reckoning took decades.
Okay, so if we weave these threads together, Medway's calculated audacity, the Hague's hopeful resistance, Srebrenica's tragic failure, the goal is clearly about forming professional conscience.
Right. Training that judgment before the pressure cooker of crisis.
making these ethical frameworks like the just war principles more than just theory.
Precisely. They're not just academic ideas, they become disciplines of the soul, directly applicable to the military vocation, but also much broader.
Let's quickly touch on those principles. We hear the terms, but what do they mean in practice? Legitimate authority.
Action draws moral force only from proper command. You act under lawful orders within a just system.
Right. Intention.
Your purpose matters. You're seeking justice, peace, restoration, not revenge or conquest. Purpose directs power.
Proportionality.
Using only the force necessary. Restraint. Economy of force. Showing mercy where possible. Strength must be measured.
Discrimination.
The absolute duty to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants and protect the innocent.
And finally, responsibility.
Accountability doesn't end when the shooting stops. It extends to the aftermath. Restitution, reform, ensuring justice is served, owning the consequences.
Now, what makes this spiritual staff ride concept really stand out, according to the sources, is extending these big military ethics principles into, well, everyday life.
Yes, into family, into community. That's crucial for building that deep spiritual resilience. The idea is if you don't practice these disciplines daily in the small things...
You won't have them when the big crisis hits.
Exactly. It's daily training for the soul.
Okay, let's walk through that. How does something like legitimate authority translate outside of a uniform, say, at home or work?
It translates into leadership through service. Authority becomes stewardship, not just control. You're responsible for people, not just in charge of them. Leading by example, by moral force, not just rank or position.
Makes sense. And proportionality, you mentioned that's maybe the most directly applicable day-to-day.
Oh, absolutely. Think strength under control. Real strength isn't yelling louder. It's measured restraint.
Like in an argument.
Exactly. A disagreement with family, a coworker. Proportionality means maybe taking a breath, lowering your voice, stepping back to cool down instead of escalating, matching the response to the offense. It's about self-mastery. If you can't control your own temper, how can you lead others effectively under pressure?
That really hits home. Self-mastery. Okay, discrimination becomes guarding dignity.
Right. You separate the problem from the person. You critique the behavior, the mistake, not the individual's identity or worth.
Preserves trust, allows for restoration.
Precisely. It keeps a relationship intact.
And responsibility owning outcomes. Why is saying sorry, which seems simple, often so hard, but so vital?
Because genuine accountability means choosing integrity over ego. Admitting fault isn't weakness. It's actually the foundation for rebuilding trust. In the military, it means fixing the system. In relationships, it means fixing the breach. It shows your character is solid.
So these daily choices, these small acts of integrity, they're the rehearsal.
They're the strategic depth for the soul. Absolutely.
Right. And interestingly, the sources connect this idea of courage and conscience, not just to battlefield crises, but also to modern, slower-moving threats. They mentioned something called Dutch Dialogues, Virginia.
Yeah, that's a fascinating modern example. Dutch engineers partnering with the U.S. military, NATO, local communities in Hampton Roads, Virginia.
To tackle what?
Rising sea levels. That whole area, including Langley Air Force Base, is incredibly vulnerable. The Newmarket Creek watershed is a specific focus.
So it's applying that same spirit of meticulous preparation and shared responsibility.
Exactly. The same kind of planning and cooperation we saw in 1667, but aimed at preservation and adaptation, facing a slow, steady threat like climate change. It's courage expressed as long-term stewardship and collaboration.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the core takeaway for you, the listener, from this deep dive into Dutch history through an ethical lens?
I think the enduring message, from the daring raid in 1667 to the failures and reckoning of 1995, is that moral victory, staying true to conscience, to faith, to ethical principles, ultimately matters more than the immediate outcome.
Integrity, practice day in and day out, that's the real measure of honor, whether you're in uniform or not.
Couldn't say it better. It all circles back to formation, to character. Which leads us to a final thought to leave you with.
Go ahead.
Where in your own life does daily courage need the most renewal right now? Is it in the patience required to truly listen, the humility to admit when you're wrong, or maybe the mercy to forgive others, or perhaps yourself and just begin again?
That's definitely something to reflect on. How is your daily integrity, your daily practice of these principles preparing you for whatever crisis, big or small, might lie ahead? Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.